You're about to spend $140 on a Windows license. But before you click that buy button, I need to show you something that Microsoft really doesn't want you to know. There are websites selling the exact same Windows key for less than $5. The same operating system, the same features, the same everything, for 97% less money. Now, you're probably thinking this is some kind of scam, right? Pirated software that's going to brick your computer or get you in legal trouble. That's exactly what Microsoft wants you to believe. But the truth is far more complicated, far more interesting, and honestly far more disturbing than you could imagine. I've spent the last 3 weeks diving deep into this rabbit hole. I've bought keys from 12 different websites. I've talked to sellers in 4 different countries. I've read through hundreds of pages of Microsoft's licensing agreements, legal documents, and court cases. And what I discovered is going to change the way you think about software, ownership, and the entire tech industry forever, because this isn't just about Windows keys. This is about a fundamental shift in how companies are rewriting the rules of commerce right under our noses. Let me start by showing you exactly what I'm talking about. Right now, if you go to Microsoft's official website and try to buy Windows 11 Home, they're going to charge you $139. Windows 11 Pro, that'll be $199. These are the official prices. This is what Microsoft says their software is worth. Now, let me open up one of these third-party websites. Here we go. Windows 11 Pro, $4.79. $4.79 for software that Microsoft is selling for almost $200. And look at this. They're not hiding. This isn't some sketchy dark web marketplace. This is a normal-looking website with customer reviews, a shopping cart, even accepts PayPal. So I bought one. Actually, I bought 12 from different sites just to be thorough. And you know what happened? Every single one of them worked. I installed Windows. I activated it with the key they sent me. Microsoft's servers accepted it without any issues. No problems whatsoever. My Windows is now fully activated, receiving updates, completely legitimate according to Microsoft's own activation servers. So what's going on here? If these keys work perfectly, if Microsoft's own systems accept them as valid, how can they possibly be this cheap? Are these stolen? Are they pirated? Am I now a criminal for using them? Here's where things get really interesting. These keys aren't fake. They're not cracked or hacked or generated by some algorithm. They are real, genuine Microsoft product keys. Keys that Microsoft themselves created and sold. So why are they so cheap? The answer involves something called the gray market, and understanding it requires us to go on a little journey through the weird world of software licensing. You see, Microsoft doesn't charge the same price for Windows everywhere in the world. A Windows license in the United States costs $140, but that same license in India might cost the equivalent of $20. In some developing countries, it's even cheaper. Microsoft does this on purpose. It's called regional pricing. And the idea is that people in poorer countries can't afford American prices. So Microsoft lowers the price to match what the local market can bear. Makes sense, right? They make less money per license, but they sell way more licenses overall. Now here's the thing. Those cheap licenses from India or Thailand or wherever, they're exactly the same as the expensive ones in America. Same software, same code, same functionality. There's literally no difference except the price Microsoft charges. So naturally, some entrepreneurial people realized they could buy keys in cheap regions and sell them in expensive regions for a profit. Buy a key in India for $20, sell it in America for $40. The American buyer saves $100, the seller makes $20 profit. Everybody's happy. Except Microsoft. Microsoft really, really hates this. They want you to pay the full American price if you live in America. They don't want you buying cheaper keys from other regions. So they've tried everything to stop it. They put region locks on some keys. They changed their licensing agreements to say you can't resell keys. They've sued resellers in court. They've pressured payment processors to stop working with these websites. But here's the thing. In most countries, including the United States and the European Union, there's a legal principle called the doctrine of first sale. It basically says that once you buy something, you own it, and you can resell it. If I buy a book, I can sell that book to someone else. If I buy a car, I can sell that car. The manufacturer can't stop me. For a long time, this applied to software too. There was a famous court case in the EU in 2012 involving a company called UsedSoft. They were buying used software licenses and reselling them. Oracle sued them, saying you can't do that. The case went all the way to the European Court of Justice. And you know what the court said? They said, yes, you absolutely can resell software licenses, even if the original license agreement says you can't. Because once Oracle sold that license, they exhausted their distribution rights. The buyer now owns it and can do whatever they want with it, including sell it to someone else. This decision sent shockwaves through the entire software industry, because suddenly all these companies that were making billions of dollars selling the same software over and over again, they now had to compete with a used market. Imagine if every time someone upgraded from Windows 10 to Windows 11, They could sell their old Windows 10 license. Microsoft would lose massive amounts of revenue. So Microsoft and other software companies started doing something sneaky. They stopped selling you software. Instead, they started licensing it to you. See the difference? When you buy something, you own it. When you license something, you're just renting it under whatever terms the company sets. And those terms can say no reselling. They rewrote all their agreements. They changed how they described their products. They even changed the language in their marketing. You're not buying Windows anymore. You're buying a license to use Windows. And that license comes with restrictions. Now, different countries have different laws about whether this is legal or not. In the EU, courts have generally said, tough luck. If you sell someone a perpetual license, that's a sale, and first sale doctrine applies. But in the United States, it's murkier. Some courts have sided with the software companies, others have sided with consumers. It's a mess. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Some of these cheap keys aren't coming from regional price differences. Some of them are coming from volume licensing agreements. See, when a big company buys Windows for all their employees, they don't pay retail price. They get massive bulk discounts. A company might pay $30 per license when buying 10,000 licenses at once. And these are special keys called volume license keys, or VLK keys. One key can activate multiple computers. Now, sometimes companies buy more licenses than they need, or they go out of business, or they switch to a different operating system. And now they have all these extra licenses sitting around, so they sell them to key resellers. The reseller pays them, say, $10 per key, then sells them to you for $20 or $30. Again, everyone profits except Microsoft, who now has people using cheap volume keys instead of buying expensive retail keys. Microsoft really hates this even more than the regional pricing thing. Because volume license keys are supposed to be for businesses only, with specific terms of service. They're not supposed to be resold to random individuals. So Microsoft has gotten more aggressive about deactivating these keys. If they detect that a volume license key is being used in a way that violates their terms, they can just remotely deactivate your Windows. One day your Windows is working fine, the next day you get a message saying your license is no longer valid. This is what happened to thousands of people back in 2018. They bought what they thought were legitimate Windows keys from reputable resellers. The keys worked fine for months. Then one day, Microsoft Mass deactivated a bunch of volume license keys that were being improperly resold. Boom. Thousands of people suddenly had unlicensed Windows. And Microsoft's response was basically, too bad, you should have bought from us directly. Now, here's my question. If I buy a key and it activates Windows, and Microsoft servers say it's valid, and I use it for 6 months with no problems, is that key legitimate or not? Because from my perspective as the end user, there's no way to tell. The key works. Windows thinks it's legit. How am I supposed to know if it came from a regional price difference or a volume license agreement or some other source? This is the fundamental problem with the gray market. For you as a consumer, there's no way to verify the provenance of a key before you buy it. That $5 key might be completely legal, or it might get deactivated in 6 months. You're rolling the dice, and Microsoft has made it this way on purpose. They could easily make their licensing system more transparent. They could tell you exactly what kind of license you have and where it came from, but they don't because the confusion serves their interests. If you're scared that cheap keys might be illegal or might get deactivated, you're more likely to pay full price. But wait, there's more. Some of these cheap keys are coming from an even shadier source. Stolen credit cards. Here's how it works. A criminal steals credit card information. They use that stolen card to buy Windows keys directly from Microsoft's website at full price. Then they immediately sell those keys on gray market sites for 50% off. They pocket the money before the credit card company does a chargeback. From Microsoft's perspective, they just sold a legitimate license. The key is real and valid, but it was purchased with stolen money. Now, if you buy one of these keys, are you doing anything wrong? You had no way of knowing the key was purchased with a stolen credit card. The key itself is legitimate. Microsoft's systems activated it without any issues. But the original purchase was fraudulent. So is your Windows license legal or not? Again, there's no way for you to know. This is the Wild West of software licensing. And it exists because the entire concept of digital ownership is fundamentally broken. Think about it. If you buy a physical object, ownership is clear. You have the object. You can use it, sell it, give it away, whatever. But with digital products, what do you actually own? You don't own the software code. That's copyrighted. Microsoft owns that. You don't own the product key. That's just a string of letters and numbers. Microsoft generated it. They can deactivate it anytime they want. What you own is a license, a permission slip. And that permission can be revoked at any time if Microsoft decides you violated some term buried in a 50-page legal agreement that nobody reads. This is why companies love software as a service models. Adobe doesn't sell you Photoshop anymore. They rent it to you monthly. Microsoft is pushing everyone toward Microsoft 365 instead of one-time purchases of Office. You don't own anything. You're just paying every month for the privilege of using their software. And if you stop paying, everything goes away. So what's the actual truth about cheap Windows keys? The truth is, they exist in a legal gray zone that Microsoft has deliberately created. Some of them are completely legal under first sale doctrine. Some of them violate Microsoft's terms of service but aren't technically illegal. Some of them were purchased with stolen credit cards. And there's no way for you as a consumer to tell the difference. If you buy a cheap key, it will probably work. Like I said, I bought 12 and they all worked. But there's a chance, a small chance, that Microsoft will deactivate it in the future. There's also a very small chance you could face legal issues, though I've never heard of Microsoft suing individual consumers, only the resellers. So should you buy cheap keys? That's up to you. Personally, I think the entire system is broken and Microsoft's pricing is predatory. Charging $140 for an operating system that costs them essentially nothing to distribute in the digital age is ridiculous. The same operating system they sell for $20 in other countries. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for Microsoft losing revenue to the gray market. They created this situation with their regional pricing schemes and their confusing licensing models. But I also want you to understand the risks. If you buy a cheap key, you're taking a gamble. It'll probably be fine, but it might not. And if Microsoft deactivates your key, you will have to either buy another cheap key or finally pay full price for a legitimate retail license. There's also a middle ground option that a lot of people don't know about. If you're a student, Microsoft offers huge discounts on Windows, sometimes even free. If you work for certain companies, they might have programs where you can get Windows cheap or free. If you're building a new computer, sometimes the Windows license is included in the price of the motherboard or comes bundled with other software. And here's something else most people don't know. You can actually use Windows without activating it. Seriously. If you install Windows and just never enter a product key, it works. You get a watermark in the corner saying it's not activated, and you can't change certain personalization settings like the wallpaper or theme colors. But everything else works normally. All the features, all the functionality, all the security updates. Microsoft doesn't lock you out. They don't cripple your computer. They just nag you with that watermark. So if you're really on a tight budget, you could just use unactivated Windows. Is this legal? Technically, Microsoft's license agreement says you're supposed to activate Windows, but they also don't prevent you from using it unactivated. They could easily make Windows stop working after 30 days if you don't activate, but they don't. Why? Probably because they'd rather have you using unactivated Windows than switching to Linux or Mac. At least with Windows, even unactivated Windows, you're in their ecosystem. You might buy other Microsoft products. You might eventually activate. You're not lost to a competitor. This is the game Microsoft is playing. They want to maximize revenue while also maximizing market share. So they charge high prices to people willing to pay full price, while tolerating gray market keys and even unactivated installations from people who won't pay full price. It's a delicate balancing act. But let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture here. This isn't really about Windows keys. This is about control. Every tech company is trying to move toward a model where you own nothing and rent everything. Your music, your movies, your software, your games, everything is becoming a subscription or a license that can be revoked. And they're doing this because it gives them more control and more money. Think about video games. You used to buy a game on a disc and you owned it forever. Now you buy a digital license and the company can ban your account and you lose all your games. Or they can shut down their servers and your game stops working. This already happened with games like The Crew, where Ubisoft just decided to shut down the servers, and now a game that people paid $60 for is literally unplayable. The disc is worthless. Your license is worthless. Ubisoft executive even said recently that gamers need to get comfortable not owning their games, not comfortable licensing them, not comfortable with subscriptions, comfortable with not owning them at all. This is the future these companies want, a future where you pay them money but don't actually own anything, where they can change the terms, raise the prices, remove features, or just shut everything down whenever they want. And there's nothing you can do about it because you never owned it in the first place. The cheap Windows key market exists because people are pushing back against this. People want to actually own their software. They want to be able to buy it once and use it forever. They want to be able to resell it if they don't need it anymore. Normal things you can do with normal products. But software companies have spent billions of dollars lobbying governments, funding legal battles, and rewriting laws to make sure you can't do these normal things with software. And they're winning. With each passing year, ownership means less and less. Your Kindle books, Amazon can remove them from your device anytime they want. Your iTunes movies, Apple can decide they no longer have the license to that movie and poof, it disappears from your library. Your digital games, the platform can ban you and you lose everything. And it's all perfectly legal because you never owned any of it. You just licensed it. So when you see those cheap Windows keys, understand what you're looking at. You're looking at the last remnants of a world where people could buy and sell software like any other product. You're looking at people exploiting loopholes and legal gray areas to resist the complete corporatization of digital ownership. You're looking at the final battlefield in a war between consumers who want to own things and corporations who want to rent everything. Is buying a cheap Windows key morally wrong? I don't think so. Microsoft makes billions of dollars in profit every year. They're not some struggling small business. They're a trillion-dollar corporation with some of the highest profit margins in the world. If they lose a few dollars because someone bought a discounted key from another region, I think they'll survive. Is it legally risky? Slightly. But Microsoft isn't going to sue you personally. Worst case scenario, they deactivate your key and you have to buy another one. That's it. They're not sending the police to your house. You're not going to jail. You're just going to be annoyed and out a few dollars. Is it worth the savings? For a lot of people, yes. If you can get Windows for $5 instead of $140, that's $135 you can spend on other components for your PC, or food, or rent, or literally anything else. Not everyone has $140 to casually spend on an operating system. But here's what I really want you to take away from this. The cheap Windows key market exists because Microsoft's pricing is arbitrary and exploitative. There's no reason Windows costs $140 in America and $20 in India, except that Microsoft thinks Americans are willing to pay more. There's no difference in the product. No difference in the cost to Microsoft, just pure price discrimination based on what the market will bear. And this is true across the entire tech industry. Adobe charges different prices in different countries. Apple does it. Google does it. They all do it because they can, because there's no real competition, because they have created walled gardens and vendor lock, and that makes it almost impossible to switch to alternatives. And because they've successfully lobbied to create a legal environment where you have no rights as a consumer. Now, let me address some specific questions I know you're thinking right now. First, what about viruses and malware? Can buying a cheap key infect your computer? The answer is no, not from the key itself. A Windows product key is just a string of characters. It's like a password. It can't carry a virus. However, some sketchy websites might bundle malware with the key delivery email or try to get you to download something. That's why you need to be careful about which sites you use. Stick to well-known gray market sites with lots of reviews. Never download any software from these sites. You should only ever download Windows directly from Microsoft's official website. The gray market site should only provide you with the product key itself, nothing else. Second question, what about updates? Will Windows update if you're using a gray market key? Yes, absolutely. Once Windows is activated, it doesn't care where the key came from. You'll get all security updates, feature updates, everything. Microsoft's update servers only check if it's activated or not. Third question, what happens if your key gets deactivated? Well, you have a few options. You can buy another cheap key and reactivate. You can buy a legitimate retail key from Microsoft. Or you can just keep using Windows unactivated with the watermark. Some people have been running unactivated Windows for years without any major issues. It's annoying, sure, but it works. Fourth question, are there any alternatives to Windows that are free? Yes, Linux exists and it's completely free and open source. Distributions like Ubuntu or Linux Mint are pretty user-friendly these days. But let's be honest, if you're asking about Windows keys, you probably need Windows for specific software or games that don't run on Linux. Linux is great, but it's not for everyone, and that's okay. Fifth question, what about OEM keys? You might have seen even cheaper keys labeled as OEM keys. These are keys that are supposed to be sold only with new hardware. Like if you're a computer manufacturer building a new PC, you can get OEM Windows licenses for cheaper. These keys are tied to the specific hardware they're installed on. You can't transfer them to a new computer later. Should you buy OEM keys? They're even riskier than regular gray market keys because they're explicitly not supposed to be sold separately from hardware. But people do it anyway, and they mostly work. So yeah, those cheap Windows keys work. They're mostly legal, mostly safe, and they're a rational response to an irrational and exploitative pricing system. Should you buy one? That's your choice. But now you know the truth. The real truth. Not the scared, straight story that Microsoft wants you to believe, where cheap keys are dangerous pirated malware that will destroy your computer, and not the too-good-to-be-true story that sketchy key reseller sites tell you, where there's absolutely no risk whatsoever. The truth is complicated. The truth is that software ownership is broken. Corporations are rewriting the rules to benefit themselves at your expense, and cheap Windows keys are one small way that regular people are fighting back. Whether you choose to participate in that fight or just pay full price for the convenience and peace of mind of an official license, at least now you can make an informed decision. And maybe, just maybe, if enough people understand how this system really works, we can start demanding better. We can demand actual ownership of digital products. We can demand transparent pricing. We We can demand that companies stop treating us like criminals for wanting to resell something we bought. We can demand laws that protect consumers instead of corporations. But that only happens if people wake up and realize what's going on. So share this information, talk about it, make noise, because the more people who understand the truth, the harder it becomes for companies to keep pulling this scam. The cheap Windows key market is a symptom of a much bigger problem. And the only way that problem gets solved is if we collectively decide we're not going to take it anymore. So there you go. That's the real truth about cheap Windows keys. Now you know.